Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharane Dirvishesha Sunyavari Paschacha De Satarane Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I'm waiting for the text to get up on this is chapter number 21. Excuse me. The Gopis attracted by the flute. With the arrival of the beautiful autumn season, the waters in the lakes and rivers became as clear as crystal and filled with fragrant lotus flowers, and breezes blew very pleasantly. At that time, Krishna entered the forest of Vrindavan with the cows and cowherd boys. Krishna was very much pleased with the atmosphere of the forest, where the flowers bloomed and bees and drones hummed very jubilantly, while the birds, trees, and plants were all looking very happy. Krishna, tending the cows and accompanied by Sri Balaram and the cowherd boys, began to vibrate his transcendental flute. After hearing the vibration of the flute of Krishna, the gopis in Vrindavan remembered him and began to talk amongst themselves about how nicely Krishna was playing his flute. When the gopis were describing the sweet vibration of Krishna's flute, they also remembered their pastimes with him. Thus, their minds became disturbed, and they were unable to describe completely the beautiful vibration. While discussing the transcendental vibration, they remembered also how Krishna dressed, decorated with a peacock feather on his head, just like a dancing actor, with blue flowers pushed over his ear. His garment glowed yellow gold, and he was garlanded with a Vaijayanti necklace. Dressed in such an attractive way, Krishna filled up the holes of his flute with the nectar emanating from his lips. So they remembered him, entering the forest of Vrindavan, which is always glorified by the footprints of Krishna and his companions. Krishna was very expert in playing the flute, and the gopis were captivated by the sound vibration, which was attractive not only to them, but to all living creatures who heard it. One of the gopis told her friends, "The highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna and Balaram entering the forest and playing their flutes and tending the cows with their friends." Persons who are constantly engaged in the transcendental meditation of seeing Krishna internally and externally by thinking of him playing the flute, entering the Vrindavan forest, and tending the cows with the cowherd boys, have really attained the perfection of samadhi. Samadhi, trance, means absorption of all the activities of the senses in a particular object. And the gopis indicate that the pastimes of Krishna are the perfection of all meditation and samadhi. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in the thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis. Another gopi expressed her opinion that Krishna and Balaram, while tending the cows with the cowherd boys, appeared just like actors going to play on a dramatic stage. Krishna was dressed in glowing garments of yellow, Balaram in blue, and they held new twigs of mango tree, peacock feathers, and bunches of flowers in their hands. Dressed with garlands of lotus flowers, they were sometimes singing very sweetly among their friends. One gopi told her friend, "How is it Krishna and Balaram are looking so beautiful?" Another gopi said, "My dear friends, we cannot even think of his bamboo flute. What sort of pious activities did it execute so that it is now enjoying the nectar of the lips of Krishna, which is actually the property of us gopis?" Krishna sometimes kisses the gopis. Therefore, the transcendental nectar of his lips is available only to them. So the gopis asked, how is it possible that the flute, which is nothing but a bamboo rod, is always engaged in enjoying the nectar from Krishna's lips? Because the flute is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. The mother and the father of the flute must be very happy. The lakes and the rivers are considered to be the mothers of the trees because the trees live simply by drinking water. So the waters of the lakes and rivers of Vrindavan were in a happy mood, full of blooming lotus flowers, because the waters were thinking, how is it that our son, the bamboo rod, is enjoying the nectar of Krishna's lips? The bamboo trees standing by the banks of the rivers and lakes were also happy to see their descendant so engaged in the service of the Lord, just as persons who are advanced in transcendental knowledge take pleasure in seeing their descendants engaged in the service of the Lord. The trees were overwhelmed with joy and were incessantly yielding honey, which flowed from the beehives hanging on their branches. Another gopi spoke thus to her friends about Krishna. Dear friends, our Vrindavan is proclaiming the glories of this entire earth because this planet is glorified by the lotus footprints of the son of Devaki. Besides that, when Govinda plays his flute, the peacocks immediately become mad, as if they had heard the rumbling of a new cloud. When all the animals and trees and plants, either on the top of Govardhan Hill or in the valley, see the dancing of the peacocks, they all stand still and listen to the transcendental sound of the flute with great attention. We think that this boon is not possible or available on any other planet. Although the gopis were village cowherd women and girls, they had extensive Vedic knowledge. Such is the effect of Vedic civilization. People in general would learn the highest truths of the Vedas simply by hearing from authoritative sources. Another gopi said, "My dear friends, just see the deer. Although they are dumb animals, they have approached the son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna. Not only are they attracted by the dress of Krishna and Balaram, but as soon as they hear the playing of the flute, the deer, along with their husbands, offer respectful obeisances unto the Lord by looking at him with great affection." The gopis were envious of the deer because the deer were able to offer their service to Krishna along with their husbands. The gopis thought themselves not so fortunate because whenever they wanted to go to Krishna, their husbands were not very happy. Another gopi said, "My dear friends, Krishna is so nicely dressed that he appears to be the impetus to various kinds of ceremonies held by the womenfolk. Even the wives of the denizens of heaven become attracted after hearing the transcendental sound of his flute. Although they are traveling in the air in their airplanes, enjoying the company of their husbands, on hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they immediately become perturbed. Their hair is loosened and their tight belts are slackened. This means that the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna extended to all corners of the universe. Also, it is significant that the gopis knew about different kinds of airplanes flying in the sky. They're called vimanas. You could call them airships. I don't know exactly what they look like, but uh, they knew they were there. Another gopi said to her friends, "My dear friends, the cows are also charmed as soon as they hear the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna. It sounds to them like the pouring of nectar, and they immediately spread their long ears just to catch the liquid nectar of the flute. As for the calves, they are seen with the nipples of their mothers pressed in their mouths, but they cannot suck the milk. They remain struck with devotion, and tears glide down from their eyes, illustrating vividly how they are embracing Krishna heart to heart. These phenomena indicate that even the cows and calves in Vrindavan knew how to cry for Krishna and embrace him heart to heart. Actually, the perfection of Krishna consciousness can be culminated in the shedding of tears from the eyes. Another young gopi told her mother, "My dear mother, the birds who are all looking at Krishna playing on his flute are sitting very attentively on the branches and twigs of different trees. From their features, it appears that they have forgotten everything and are engaged only in hearing Krishna's flute. This proves that they are not ordinary birds. They are great sages and devotees, and just to hear Krishna's flute, they have appeared in Vrindavan forest as birds." The narration continues. Great sages and scholars are interested in Vedic knowledge, but the essence of Vedic knowledge is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedaischa sarvaya aham eva vedaha. Through the knowledge of the Vedas, Krishna has to be understood. Another time, Prabhupada translates that phrase, all the Vedas are just a searching after Krishna. From the behavior of these birds, it appeared that they were great scholars in Vedic knowledge, and that they took to Krishna's transcendental vibration and rejected all branches of Vedic knowledge. Even the river Jamuna, very much desiring to embrace the lotus feet of Krishna, after hearing the transcendental vibration of his flute, broke her fierce waves to flow very nicely with lotus flowers in her hands, that is to say, in the recurrence, just to present flowers to Mukunda with deep feeling. The scorching heat of the autumn sunshine was sometimes intolerable, and therefore the clouds in the sky appeared in sympathy above Krishna and Balaram and their boyfriends while they engaged in blowing their flutes. The clouds served as a soothing umbrella over their heads, just to make friendship with Krishna. The Aborigine girls, so these are the forest-dwelling native people. The Aborigine girls became fully satisfied when they smeared their faces and breasts with the dust of Vrindavan, which was reddish from the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. The Aborigine girls had very full breasts, and they were also very lusty. But when their lovers touched their breasts, the girls were not very much satisfied. When they came out into the midst of the forest, they saw that while Krishna was walking, some of the leaves and creepers of Vrindavan had turned reddish from the kumkum powder which fell from his lotus feet. His lotus feet are held by the gopis on their breasts, which are smeared with kumkum powder. But when Krishna travels in the Vrindavan forest with Balaram and his boyfriends, the reddish powder falls on the ground. So the lusty Aborigine girls, while looking toward Krishna playing his flute, saw the reddish kumkum on the ground and immediately took it and smeared it over their faces and breasts. In this way, they became fully satisfied, although they were not satisfied when their lovers touched their breasts. All material lusty desires can be immediately satisfied if one comes in contact with Krishna consciousness. That means when Krishna consciousness actually develops, you're satisfied in every department and you don't think you're missing out anywhere because you're not. Another gopi began to praise the unique position of Govardhan Hill in this way. How fortunate is this Govardhan Hill, for it is enjoying the association of Lord Krishna and Balaram, who are accustomed to walking on it. Thus, Govardhan is always in touch with the lotus feet of the Lord. And because Govardhan Hill is so obliged to Lord Krishna and Balaram, it is supplying different kinds of fruits, roots, and herbs, as well as very pleasing crystal waters from its lakes in presentation to the Lord. The best presentation offered by Govardhan Hill, however, is newly grown grass for cows and calves. Govardhan Hill knows how to please the Lord by pleasing his most beloved associates, the cows and the cowherd boys. Another gopi said, "Everything appears wonderful when Krishna and Balaram travel in the forest of Vrindavan, playing their flutes and making intimate friendship with all kinds of moving and non-moving living creatures." When Krishna and Balaram played on their transcendental flutes, the moving creatures became stunned and stopped. The moving creatures become stunned and stop their activities, and the non-moving living creatures, like trees and plants, begin to shiver with ecstasy. These are the wonderful reactions to the vibration of the transcendental flutes of Krishna and Balaram. Krishna and Balaram carried binding ropes on their shoulders and in their hands, just like ordinary cowherd boys. While milking cows, cowherd boys bind the cow's hind legs with a small rope. This rope almost always hangs from the shoulders of cowherd boys, and it was not absent from the shoulders of Krishna and Balaram. In spite of their being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they played exactly like cowherd boys, and therefore everything became wonderful and attractive. While Krishna was engaged in tending the cows in the forest of Vrindavan or on Govardhan Hill, the gopis in the village were always absorbed in thinking of him and discussing his different pastimes. This is the perfect example of Krishna consciousness to, somehow or other, remain always engrossed in thoughts of Krishna. The vivid example is always present in the behavior of the gopis. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya declared that no one can worship the Supreme Lord by any method which is better than the method of the gopis. The gopis were not born in very high Brahmana or Kshatriya families. They were born in the families of Vaishyas, and not in big mercantile communities, but in the families of cowherd men. They were not very well educated, although they heard all sorts of knowledge from the Brahmanas, the authorities of Vedic knowledge. The gopis' only purpose was to remain always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 21st chapter of Krishna, the gopis attracted by the flute. That's it.
Okay, a shorter story for today, but if anybody has questions or comments, reflections of any kind, go ahead and either raise your hand, type them into the comment section, or simply unmute yourself. It's a small group today, so no worries of just unmuting yourself. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and type in your comment there or question there, and I'll try to read them off as well. And our trusty Vijay Krishna Prabhu, please go ahead and speak. Unmute yourself.
Shraddha Devi Mataji?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so thank you for your service. Maharaj, my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Related to this chapter 21, the gopis attracted by the flute, I have 6 questions. But okay, our time is limited, and let me go for the first one. In accordance with this edition I have on my hands, the real book, at the very end of the second paragraph, you read to us, the highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna and Balaram entering the forest and playing their flutes and tending the cows with their friends. So my question is, there is a different book, The Nectar of Instruction, where we find Rupa Goswami saying that the perfection of spiritual life is exhibited, if I may say so, on the shores of the Radhakunda lake, where the loving pastimes between Krishna and Radharani happen. So I'm confused here because I thought that after reading Nectar of Instruction, I thought that the perfection of the eyes was to see Krishna and Radharani in their loving exchanges at the Radhakunda lake. But here we see that maybe it is enough to see Krishna and Balaram entering the forest and playing their flutes and tending their cows.
What's your question?
What is the difference?
They're both the highest perfection of the eyes. Isn't that possible? Some people want their highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna this way, and other people, the highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna that way, and they're both the highest perfection of the eyes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we get to your other 5 questions, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, can we see if anybody else has a comment or question? There's just a few on, no questions yet on Facebook, but
Hare Krishna.
thank you. Kendra Prabhu, go ahead.
Jai Gurudev, thank you very much for reading to us. My obeisances to you. One thing I was thinking in the beginning of the chapter where it gives the description of the beautiful forest of Vrindavan and the clear waters and the blooming flowers and the buzzing bees and how much Krishna appreciated it. It reminded me of something I think you've said in the past about how Krishna includes his environment and how one feature of the spiritual world is that the climate is really nice.
That's right.
And just hearing that passage today made me think that that Krishna includes Krishna's environment and everything about him is attractive, including the environment he chooses to live in.
Yeah, it's like his clothes, it's the same thing.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I don't have 6 questions, but I did have another comment or maybe question, and I hope this doesn't sound silly, but when the gopis are appreciating Krishna's flute and talking about the different forest animals, like the deer, for example, how they're able to appreciate Krishna along with their husbands, but when the gopis want to go to Krishna, their husbands are not very happy.
Yeah,
And
that's nice.
that's something I always wondered about a little bit, because in Vrindavan, we understand that all the living entities are Krishna conscious. They're all in love with Krishna in one way or another in some rasa. And this feature of Vrindavan that includes husbands of gopis who are not favorably inclined towards Krishna, it always puzzles me just a little bit. And I wondered if you might want to address that at all.
I don't know. Did it say they were not favorably inclined toward Krishna, or they were just not favorably inclined to their wives being favorably inclined?
Okay. I guess
How
that's
it works out that for them, I'm not quite sure.
yeah.
Does it increase like that relationship of
Oh yeah, of course.
the gopis stealing away? If their husbands were fine with it,
Yeah, sure.
that do to the storyline.
That adds spice. Yeah, This is this Parakiya Rasa idea,
Right, right. We were hearing last night, Jayadvaita Maharaj is talking about the differences between Krishna and Balaram, for example, that there are disagreements and sometimes very heated disagreements
Mhm.
between the two of them. But that, like you say, that accentuates and heightens the rasa
Mhm.
because it's a variety that if it didn't exist, things would be less interesting.
Yeah. I think somewhere Prabhupada described spiritual feelings as steady, variegated bliss. It's like it's always blissful, but it's always like something to surprise you every time.
Yeah. Jai, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question, Akendra Prabhu. I was actually thinking the same thing, so I appreciate that you asked. And just to add on to that, I'm always interested in these references to the Aborigine girls, and
Hmm.
I assume they had husbands as well, and they're not quite mentioned as being attracted to Krishna. So there was a
No.
lot of activity going
Mhm.
on that not necessarily didn't seem like everybody was just falling over for Krishna in one sense. I don't know if we know much more about them.
Well, even today, I know people who live in Vrindavan who are not much attracted to Krishna. So it seems to.
And Nindita, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Hare
Thank you for
Krishna.
a wonderful class. It was so nice to hear you read Krishna book. I have two questions. One is connected to the chapter you read today. It says that the gopis, when they were seeing that the deers, along with their husbands, were serving Krishna, then there was a feeling of envy in their heart. So I wasn't able to understand because Prabhupada says that's the only feeling that cannot be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, the feeling of envy. So how do we understand that the gopis were envious of the deers?
Well, this kind of envy, and I think when feelings for Krishna get enhanced, sometimes things that look like they're bad, like envy, actually increases your love for Krishna. So in that case, it's not detrimental, and so yeah, so somehow it works together that way to if it enhances love for Krishna, then it will help.
Okay. So it's definitely, my understanding is it's definitely not the envy that we feel in this material world.
No. Yeah.
I'll wait for the others before I ask my second question. Thank you very much, Guru.
Thank you for your question. Did you say you had a second question?
Oh, yeah, okay. My second question was not very much connected to this chapter. When I try to chant attentively, Gurudev, the grateful thoughts for you and for other devotees is what comes in my mind. Is that okay, or should I just try to focus on the sound vibration?
Well, generally we try to focus on the sound vibration of Krishna consciousness, but if it comes about that something in your chanting reminds you of some favorable thing from some devotee, that's quite all right too. They're also servants of the holy name. So the holy name has entourages too, and you can also think of them. But don't forget the holy name while you're thinking of the devotees. Oh yeah, I remember that car he had once. That was no good. It broke down, and then your mind goes. So,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you for those questions. And Vijay Krishna Prabhu, what about question number 2?
Yes, Mataji. My question number 2 is related to the end of the third paragraph, which tells us about samadhi, trance, Samadhi trance means absorption of all the activities of the senses in a particular object. And the Gopis indicate that the pastimes of Krishna are the perfection of all meditation and samadhi. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in the thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis. So my question is, I find it difficult for a devotee working in a factory, for example, to be always experiencing this kind of trance, because I have the idea, maybe I am wrong, that for me to be always connected with Krishna through samadhi, I should be there living in a temple, being a pujari, taking care of the deities. Anything other than this, it would be there creating difficulties against being in samadhi. Is it that it depends on what you are doing, where you are living, your lifestyle, daily lifestyle? Do I need to be a pujari to be always in trance? Or can I be always in trance while working in a factory?
Well, working in a factory is generally called ugra karma by Srila Prabhupada. So it's not very favorable in that way. But anything that you're doing as service for Krishna. Now, if you were living in the factory and using all your money for Krishna's service, then you can think of Krishna in that way, connected with your factory activities. But for example, when Prabhupada was in a car and a devotee was driving the car, he wanted him also to pay attention to the traffic, for example, and the traffic signs and the roads and things like that. You could always be chanting Hare Krishna while you're doing it, but it's not that kind of chanting you give when you sit down and you do japa. But still, because that car is being used in Krishna's service, and so Prabhupada really did want people to do that correctly. But it's sometimes but you're doing it for Krishna's service, so you should think of that service. I was told once, for example, Prabhupada going for a walk in the morning in the neighborhood around the Los Angeles temple, and he was typically with devotees with him. While walking around, he noticed that the outside faucet on somebody's house, where you would hook up a hose to water the lawn, there was an outside water faucet. It was not properly shut off and water was being wasted. It was dripping out very profusely. And Prabhupada made sure that somebody went and shut it. I think he asked I've heard the story two ways. One's that he went and shut it off, or he asked some devotee to do it. I don't know which is true, but either way, he paid attention to that, and that wasn't a distraction from his service either. This is how we have to understand that we should try to do everything that's in connection with Krishna, and sometimes that service will take you away from things. Prabhupada, even in the preface to his Bhagavad Gita, of Srimad Bhagavatam that he had printed in India, he said, I'm a sannyasi, I'm supposed to be in Vrindavan, but here I am in the middle of the city, going to booksellers, to paper merchants, doing all these things just like an ordinary person. And they may think I'm deviating from what I'm supposed to be doing. But no, this is in the process of glorifying Krishna, so it's also spiritual.
It is also samadhi.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Maharaj. Wonderful answer.
Okay, Vijay Kashyap, could you maybe choose one more question and then we'll open up to others and then we'll close it out for today, okay?
Yes, Mataji. My third question, actually, it is related to somehow to you, because you are in a female body. And here, at the very end of one of the chapters, we read, although the gopis were village cowherd women and girls, they had extensive Vedic knowledge. Such is the effect of Vedic civilization. People in general would learn the highest truths of the Vedas simply by hearing from authoritative sources. So my question is, sometimes I find even senior devotees representing the Lord Chaitanya's movement saying that women are not allowed to sit on the Vyasa to give classes. And and this is a little confusing to me because when we read this chapter, we see that even the gopis were learned people. So why not? Why not allowing the gopis and the women of our time to say something to present the knowledge, because just see how wonderfully they are commenting on Krishna and Balaram here and giving us so much knowledge, and we see they are pure devotees because the way they used to appreciate Krishna and Balaram in this chapter related to the flute is so enlightening and so convincing about what we would be there losing if choosing not to worship Krishna and Balaram. They are inviting us to worship Krishna and Balaram with these comments related to the flute. So I personally want the learned women of our time to say something, following the footsteps of these learned gopis. I don't see why is it that devotees are there not allowing women, female devotees to teach.
You asking me that question?
No, I need a comment from you if possible.
A comment from me, not an answer?
Well,
I thought maybe you were
yeah.
asking. Are you asking Shraddha? I didn't know who was directed at.
You're welcome to respond.
No. The question is to Maharaj. I was not asking the question Shraddha Deva Mataji. I'm saying that Shraddha Deva Mataji is a learned devotee. She's in a female body, and
Okay.
I think she's allowed to give classes. But what do you think?
Go ahead.
I think women should be allowed to give classes if they're qualified to do so.
Thank you,
There are
Maharaj.
some people who disagree with me.
Sorry, what?
There are apparently some people who disagree with that.
And Jayadutta Swami has a comment here too. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Yeah, I'll throw something in. I'm not against women in classes. I've been doing it since early days. But I think the applicant of the example is fair. The gopis are not women of this world, and therefore the comparison sort of fails. We could put demons on the Vyasa because Vritrasura was such a great devotee. So why shouldn't demons be allowed to sit on the Vyasa?
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with the conclusion here. I just don't think that the argument.
Yeah, the argument holds because the gopis are
Thank you for that,
not
Marsh.
of this world. That's
Appreciate
right.
that.
That's true. They
Thank
should
you,
be
Maharaj.
used as an example in this argument, one way or the other.
Thank you, Jayadvaita Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. So any other comments or questions on Zoom from anybody else who has not yet spoken? And just a couple comments on Facebook. Adi Devi says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please at my humble obeisances. Shaila Vasini Devi Dasi says, thank you for reading to us these beautiful pastimes of Lord Krishna. And Sankarshana Prabhu says, thanks for the reading. And
Okay.
that's it. So, and just in terms of announcements, we will continue with Bhagavatam on Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. And considering that next week is Janmashtami already, I'll be sending down an announcement, but Satsrup Maharaj and Ravindra Svarupa Prabhu will be speaking Janmashtami morning at 11 a.m. It'll be a joint class between them. And yeah, the Zoom details will be coming soon.
Okay.
Those are the announcements. Thank you all for
So
joining
I
us.
have a
and-
lot of fun coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj, for attending, and obeisances
thank
to
you.
you.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much. Sorry I
Thank
couldn't
you.
come earlier.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jai Jai.
Had to brave the typhoons and tornadoes and all these things. The winds, typhoon, hurricane.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Martin. Wonderful service. Haribol.
Jai Jai Jai.